the stories of entrepreneurs and how they overcame the struggles and challenges to get where they are today. This is Believe in the Entrepreneur with Joel Sandoval, CPA.
What's going on? Welcome to another episode of Believe in the Entrepreneur, and I'm super excited because I have Deric Blanton in the house, who is a SoCal native, moved to Bakersfield, my now hometown. Since 2005, I moved to Bakersfield around 2007, actually, around the same time when Bakersfield was, it's been a growing city since then, but he's now a, successful insurance broker working for Sabre Insurance Agency. So Deric, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Joel. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So Deric, for my listeners that don't really know who you are, why don't we take it back to, what made you kind of want to be an entrepreneur and specifically in the insurance industry?
Okay. How much time do we have?
Let's take it, man.
Okay.
Yeah, just.
Grew up in Southern California, Orange County. And so when I was growing up, my mom was in the Army, and so we moved around quite a bit, lived in several different states, one of them being Alaska. Lived in Anchorage for a while, Kauai Island, and then but we always came back to SoCal, and so grew up there, elementary, junior high, high school, graduated in '96, and did 2 years of junior college, and then ended up getting recruited out to Iowa. And so went to a small D2 school out in Iowa, got my degree, came back to California with my girlfriend and turned to my fiance and then eventually my wife. And so we got relocated, actually, had some deaths in the family, and relocated to Bakersfield in 2005. Tried to reconcile a little bit, and that didn't end up working out. We had a daughter. She's 18 now, graduated high school, Liberty, actually, earlier this year. And so remarried, actually, in 2014. And ironically enough, met her on Christian Mingle. And people ask me, that really works. And I tell them, yeah, when you use it for what its intended purpose is, it works really well. And so we've had 2 kids since then, and a 5-year-old girl, 6-year-old boy. And of course, I have my daughter, and then my wife has a 21-year-old son who moved back to San Bernardino, where they're from. And over the course of that time, especially since being in Bakersfield, my background education's in exercise science and physiology. So I was going to be trainer to the stars, right? Athletes, you name it. Didn't end up meeting very many and wasn't connected really to any. And so, but gave me an opportunity when it came to Bakersfield to put that to work. And got on with a local gym chain here in town, opened a couple of clubs with them in 2006 and 2007. And then on a whim, people kind of told me throughout my life that I had the demeanor for law enforcement. And so kind of pursued that avenue a little bit and applied for almost every agency out there, sheriff, CHP, what have you, and corrections. So ended up, it was just an offshoot, went through the academy out at West Tech in Shafter, and ended up getting starting on at Taft, the federal prison. And I was out there for just under a year. And but for anyone who has been out to Taft, it's quite a drive. And so a lot of accidents and things like that. So I found out there was a facility here in Bakersfield, came back and got on here locally. And interestingly enough, like maybe most CEOs do, I got turned on to insurance in 2017 and came in on the life and health side. And really at the time, it was more of a way to supplement my income. And, all this talk about all the money that you can make and this and that. And I'm like, okay, well, I just want to be able to supplement and have enough to live comfortably. Mm-hmm. And so end up getting on with an IMO. Anybody in that space familiar with the terminology? A lot of acronyms. IMO, FMO, Independent Marketing Org. And so that's what that was, and did that for about a year and a half, and then an opportunity opened up with a bigger commercial shop, and one that would be pretty much anybody would recognize the name of. And so I got on with them in 2019, and then of course 2020 hit.
Mm-hmm.
And of course everybody had to navigate COVID. And for all of the coaching and the talk about what a face-to-face business life insurance was, insurance in general, but more so life insurance, obviously COVID affected that. And everybody had to kind of navigate that and start to go virtual and things like that. So we did that through 2021. And as you, probably like most industries, the longer that you're in it and you evolve and grow and you begin to kind of see behind the curtain a little bit, and you get exposed to some things, and you're able to kind of evaluate those and determine whether or not it's a path you want to continue towards. So looking at the two different sides, P&C, property casualty, and then life, especially here in California, property casualty, workers' compensation, general liability, things like that are required. Like, it's not a choice. For you to be in business, you have employees, you have to have it.
Right.
Life can be somewhat more of a supplemental benefit. So last summer, I ended up getting my P&C broker's license, and got on with a small shop that at the time may not have been really set up to bring on producers and have a mentor and a coach and that sort of a thing, but learned a ton. And I remember I'd gotten in contact with the owner of the agency I'm with now, Sabre, back when I was still training, and wanted to do sort of a corporate membership type situation for their staff. But it was a small office, and so that didn't end up going through, but I'd always kept them in the back of my mind. And met with the owner early September, probably tail end of August, and then again early September. And we were able to work out a deal, and so just building my foundation. So that's kind of gotten me to where I am now.
Nice. Now, question, because you were basically in law enforcement. So because based on your bio, it doesn't say anything about law enforcement now.
Yeah.
So are you out of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Out. No longer affiliated.
Yeah.
And so a little bit different aspect being inside a facility versus, patrol units like a PD or sheriff's, or highway patrol. And so a little bit, different perspective in the sense that, you're really, herding cattle. I mean, in a sense that, everybody's, secured inside already.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're more of a chaperone type of situation. Now, you do have elements that don't necessarily want to be subject to authority, and so then there's ways of dealing with those. But for the most part, they do police themselves, so to speak. And so it was a part of the journey, but committed full time now, 100% to this agency, and then of course down the road having my own.
Nice. Awesome. So it's pretty funny, you're interesting, kind of it's relatable to me because it looks like you kind of had these regular kind of jobs, and then just recently you were kind of like exposed to the insurance world, and anything regarding insurance or entrepreneurship, it's all about sales, all about customer service, and you kind of like on your own now. And I remember, like, for me, for example, you said that insurance for you was more supplemental income. You did it because, I can make some extra money, but it's not really like going to be, you probably didn't know at the time that it was going to be your full-time, opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was kind of the same. Like I went to school to get my degree in accounting, and I just started doing like taxes for family members. I remember doing it for like, my brother, my cousins. It was just more of a favor. And I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also, I would charge them very, very minimal. It was just kind of, a way for me to make supplemental income. And eventually just starting like, hey, my cousin would, hey, I have a friend from work who also was wondering if you could do hers. And I'm like, sure. And it started kind of growing a little bit without actually intending it to grow. And eventually it grew a little bit too much where it started kind of being a conflict with my regular W-2 job.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was very overwhelming during tax season because I was growing in my regular career, which now my employer was requiring more and more of my time. Yet I had this business on the side that was growing too, that was also requiring more of my time, and I couldn't really balance the two.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to basically make a decision, at least for me, as to what I wanted to do. I came across a situation where my employer, wasn't very flexible with my schedule. And I can go into that story. My listeners probably already know that story as to what made me kind of like make the jump, because got into kind of a disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually that's what caused me to start my own firm, and now it's grown to what it is today, which is, now I have 14 full-time employees. Never would have imagined that it would turn into what it is today. And, I'm very blessed. Like looking back, I'm very blessed, very thankful that, I've gotten here.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, again, it all started with just, let me make some supplemental income. And, some people are born entrepreneurs. I was not a born entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to know as to your story of like, what made you kind of shift from, law enforcement usually is pretty stable, government always pays their employees, and now going to, more of a commission based, people business. So what made you kind of make that shift? I mean, was it kind of similar to mine? Tell me your story on that.
Yeah. So I've had, a number of different jobs. And within the correctional setting, there's state CDCR, right? And then there's a private sector. So where the state will contract with different facilities, like some people may know Taft Federal as Wackenhut. Or when I was downtown Bakersfield, at the time it was Mesa Verde CCF, Community Correctional Facility. Then the state kind of started to go through their thing and started to close down CCFs. And then more recently in 2018 out of McFarland, before they closed that facility down. And so in the private sector, like with Taft, for instance, the pay was great and things like that. But again, there was, that drive and working overnight shifts and having to take into consideration my family, my kids, and what was, and then making that drive. And so the pay, when I came to Bakersfield, I actually took a pay cut. And then McFarland was a little bit better, but it was funny because when I interviewed out there, it was for just a floor officer position, just working in a dorm. And during the course of the interview, the chief of security at the time, and then her second in command were kind of talking and getting together, and they said, hey, we've got a lieutenant position open. Would you want to, you're here already, would you want to interview for it? And so I said, sure, a few more dollars an hour. And, so I come from I'm the first one in my family to graduate college. And at the time, coming up through junior high, high school, and college, I mean, that was, at least through high school, it was all about the degree, pick what you're going to do. And it's so funny looking back on it. And I know you and I both have probably heard different versions of this, and people speak about this. Just with respect to college not necessarily being for everybody.
Right.
There's the trades. I mean, there's just there's entrepreneurship, and there's a number of different avenues now with the advancement of social media and tech and just that whole thing that give you that opportunity. But I come from a W-2 background. And so when I was approached, but I will say this, I've always been open-minded. I've always looked for the opportunity. And so anything that I saw the opportunity in, I would think, well, why not me? And so I've been approached with a number of opportunities, obviously, since then. And so with respect to insurance, I'd never thought about insurance. I didn't know anybody who was in insurance. But when you're exposed to it, and you're exposed to it in the right way by the right people who have a right system and things like that, and you get the right coaching, it can be a huge opportunity. And so as I grew, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm an extrovert. And people, I think, tend to think that extroverts are just naturally going to gravitate towards sales because you got to be chitty chatty and have the gift of gab and all these different things. And I know a lot of successful, and I'm sure you probably do as well, a lot of successful people who are actually introverts at heart.
Right.
And so I've had to, with respect to the sales role, and involvement of sales under the umbrella of entrepreneurship, to go out and shake hands and do events and network and all those kinds of things that come along with it. I've had to adapt to that and get myself, in a state mentally, as well as emotionally, because in sales in general, you're going to hear no more than you hear yes. And you have to develop a mindset that is going to allow you to overcome that and be successful.
100%. Yeah, I think entrepreneurship and sales is all about mindset because, like you said, we hear no more often than we hear yes. And so you have to have that, the ability to bounce back and the ability to start fresh every new call and every new conversation and have that, because you probably could have, gotten into, you got rejected again, or whatever the case may be. And now you might have an opportunity where they're going to say yes, but you don't know it. And so you got to have the right mindset. You got to have the right attitude in order to close that sale. Otherwise, even if it was a good opportunity because you kind of came in this with the wrong mindset, probably not going to close that deal. And so I think that's super important. Right. Now, kind of going back to your story though. So obviously family was important to you because, the drive was interfering with, maybe your work-life balance. You probably weren't spending as much time as you would like to, sounds like, with your wife and kids. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of even decided to, hey, I'll even take less pay in order to make sure I have that time with my family. Mm-hmm. And I think family for me is probably what gives me I always say, like, it reduces my energy. It brings mm-hmm. It fills up my cup. So that way the next day I'm ready to go at it again and hopefully provide for my family. And so that I think is very important. But once you made the transition back to Bakersfield, though, you obviously didn't have that anymore.
Right.
So why cut ties with that to do insurance?
So, within insurance, within sales, I think part of that attraction is that there's no cap. There is no glass ceiling. There really, there really isn't one. If you're passionate about what it is you're doing, it doesn't have to be insurance. Could be any product or service. And then on the W-2 side, it becomes an issue of trading time for money. How much time you can never trade enough time, as far, in my opinion, to go as far as you want to go or go as high as you want to go. So with respect to when I made that move and came locally to Bakersfield, I started out as an officer, worked my way up to sergeant. But, people are in higher positions for a lifetime. I mean, they have to die or retire for there to be an opening. Mm-hmm. When I went out to McFarland, same sort of thing. The chief of security was set. The warden was set. I mean, those administrative positions were above and beyond because you would have needed additional schooling. You probably would have needed a master's degree on paper to even apply for those positions. So the lieutenant position, which really all that really meant was that you wore a different colored shirt.
Right.
And so at the same time, you have this concern about who wants your job, right? Mm-hmm. Who, because obviously there's a little bit of increase in pay, a little bit of increase in status, a little, authority maybe. But with that also comes a responsibility. So you can look at it both ways. And, I wanted that. I knew deep down inside I wanted freedom. I knew deep down inside that God had created me for more. What that looked like, I didn't quite know at the time. And so I started to search that out. So when people came with opportunities, I was like, okay, Lord, is this going to be the right one for me? Let me find out a little bit more. And as I started to find out a little bit more and develop a process, I started to, I was able to combine the two, similar to your situation. And I saw examples of people who were free financially and they weren't dictated to from someone above them. They didn't have to adhere to a specific schedule, because with corrections, law enforcement in general, it's, we don't take holidays off. It's 24/7, 365. And so worked a lot of holidays. And again, the shifts, when you're the body, now kind of going back more to the science part of it, the body is designed to be awake operate and function during the daytime, really has a hard time making that switch to doing overnights. And then coming off of that, you're asleep for the other half of the day, and so, that limits time with the family to be able to go to things, events, travel, those sort of things. And I just began, the more and more I got exposed to the entrepreneurship side of things, and specifically insurance, started to think, well, why not me? And so I was like, well, I can't continue to walk the line. I've got to pick one or the other. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? I can only go so far in the correctional space. Let me cut that and just pursue, being entrepreneurship, sales, however you look at it, full time.
Awesome, man. Love that story.
Yeah.
And I think, it almost goes back to, you looked at, okay, there's a potential for unlimited income, basically. Like you said, there's no ceiling, where as opposed to W-2, no matter how many hours you work, there's only a certain amount of income you're going to make. Again, it's also based on seniority and who's above you and things like that. So there's a lot of, business politics involved, but, in entrepreneurship, you don't really have those limits. And so you saw that opportunity. However, that being said, just like there's an unlimited amount of income, you also don't have that steady paycheck anymore. Right. Yeah. So how do you deal with that? What's your mindset during that time?
Well, God blessed me with a forgiving wife. For sure. Not to say we haven't had our ups and downs, and but she kind of comes from a similar background, a W-2 sort of background. She worked for a really well-known distribution center, and 18 years she had worked for that company, and but she would tell me stories about people who had been employed longer than her, 20-something years, 30-something years. That were let go.
Wow.
And because the decision at that point for a corporation really is that simple. Mm-hmm. And again, the politics and everything that goes on behind the scenes. And so we had a number of conversations about that, and she's been extremely supportive. And so we knew that the transition was going to have to be, okay, your biweekly income will have to kind of support us. I'll chip in where I can. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but God sustained us, and with the help of some family members along the way, we were able to kind of at least keep our heads above water with respect to the bills, right? Mm-hmm. The mortgage, the car payment, insurance, and things like that. So. And this way, I've also gotten to be a little bit more, well, not a little bit, but a lot more involved in my children's lives, being able to take them to school, pick them up from school, attend different events and things like that gave me the opportunity. It's, I remember going shopping one time, and gosh, it was 10:30 in the morning, and had to run to the store real quick and grab something. Had my kids with me at the time. They were a lot younger, and I was the only dad in there with his kids. And so sort of a unique opportunity there too, to see them, because that was the other piece of it. it's different when you watch your kids grow up. Now that we have cell phones with cameras and things like that, you can text photos back and forth. But to see them grow up over a camera versus actually being there physically, huge difference. And I take that every day.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the obviously the benefits of entrepreneurship is the ability to have that flexibility where you might not have that when you're kind of stuck to that 9 to 5 because you have a certain job description that has to be done and has to be met, as opposed to when you're an entrepreneur, you kind of make your own schedule and you get to decide your priorities and you get to decide what you want to do that day and whether or not you want to and how important it is to you. And if your kids' school event's more important, then you're going to make that a priority, and maybe you just let your customers know, like, hey, I'll take care of you, but right now you just be transparent with them and have a school event with my kid and give me an hour or 2 hours, whatever it is, and I'll call you right back. And most of the time customers are understanding anyway because they have a family themselves.
Absolutely.
But entrepreneurship gives us that flexibility. But what I really enjoyed about your story is that you had a forgiving wife similar to mine. Although my wife gave me a deadline. She's like, I don't know if you know my story after listening to the Brad Lee podcast.
Just a little bit.
But my wife gave me a 9-month deadline. She's like, hey, you have 9 months to make this work. And we lived off her paycheck for 9 months. And, but I think it also pushed me and it drove me to make sure I can sustain the family after when that 9-month period came. And thankfully, again, with God's will, and God's blessings, I was able to make it happen. So, but I think also what I found very, very interesting that, when we have that paycheck, it almost, kind of stables, makes us like miss out on opportunities because we get comfortable. But how secure really is it, right? Like you said, there's people that were working with your wife that had been there longer than she had, and were still let go.
Yep.
And when over here we're thinking that we have this stable job, and all of a sudden we have no income. And so one thing I think I remember, because I studied, I'm a very analytical person as an accountant, so I'd studied entrepreneurship for years before I decided to kind of go all in. And one of the things that I remember learning, it was like, hey, when you have a regular W-2 job, you basically have one customer, which is your employer. And that's the customer that you have to make happy. Right. But when you're an entrepreneur, you might have 100 customers. So if one decides to say, I'm going to fire you, Joel, well, at least you still have 99 customers that are paying you. So really you have more stability in entrepreneurship than you do as a W-2 employee. And when I learned that, I was like, for me, it was like just mind boggling. It was like I had never even thought of that. And I was like, that's so true. I'm over here staying with my W-2 job when that's probably actually less secure than if I had my own business. And, and I can tell you as a business owner, I get hired and I get fired all the time.
Right.
I mean, I got hired last week and then I got fired that same week. And it's like, obviously you try to limit those and try to learn from it. You get feedback and you make your business better. And sometimes it wasn't the right fit. Sometimes it was our mistake. Sometimes it just didn't start off with the right expectations. There's different criteria, but at the end of the day, the goal is to get hired more than you're getting fired, but at least you have actually more stability than you do when you're actually working that W-2 regular job.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting dynamic, especially when an insurance agent, believe me, as an insurance broker, getting hired and fired weekly, a daily, almost, I can empathize 100%. And, but then there's, a passion of mine is golf. And so there are times when I've been able to do my work during a round of golf.
Nice.
And no way obviously to ever be able to do that in my old job, my old line of work. And so that for me keeps me going, keeps me motivated. And but you're right. It's there's always a certain amount of retention involved. And then you know that there's going to be that turnover, and adjusting and being able to account for that, I think comes over time.
Right.
So.
Yeah, 100%. I think like at the end of the day, like you said, it just comes down to weighing your options and your advantages and disadvantages to kind of both, and seeing what fits you better based on your lifestyle that you want, your dreams, your aspirations. And like you said, I mean, now you have the flexibility to attend school events. You have the ability to play golf while you're making income, right? You have the ability to basically be on this podcast, right? It gives you so much more freedom, but it takes, I would say it takes courage, a supporting spouse. It takes also the right mindset, like we talked about, and just kind of, going to one day at a time, always trying to get better.
Absolutely. And to your point, as far as being analytical is concerned, there might be varying levels of that. One thing that I've heard throughout my journey, since 2017, is I tend to overthink things, because anytime that I come across something, and it could be a speaker that I listened to, it could be something that I saw on YouTube, it could be a podcast that I heard, I'm always kind of trying to put myself in that person's shoes. And I think my experiences in life are pretty relatable to other people's. And, at the end of the day, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of what is going to be in the best interest and add the most value to the person that I'm talking to, and come at it that way. And so, I'm going to want to know a couple of different things, how to approach something from a couple of different angles, really glean from others' experience and expertise like yourself, and then package that obviously like with, put my own little spin on it and my personality and that sort of thing. But so far it's worked out really well.
That's awesome. I love that mindset because, in sales and entrepreneurship, it's easy to be like, we're trying to win, right? And we're trying to grow and we're trying to provide for our families. And sometimes we might have the wrong mindset where it's like, hey, I need to win. I need to, but it's like the way you win is actually by looking out for what's best for the person in front of you, right? How can I provide the most value? Like you said, how can I provide the best service, the best, how can I be of service to you, and how can I make an impact in your life? And that's really when you end up winning, is when you have that mindset. And I think that's probably what's allowed you to make the transition over to insurance, because of that, that quality, of making sure like, hey, how can I help you? How can I be of service? And obviously putting your experience and your background into, whatever conversation you're having.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you can, so for me, I'm always looking at the opportunity. And so it's like, okay, I can be a part, when you're, at least given my experience when I was in the facility, my supporting cast, the people around me were determined for me. Now I can flip that. Now I get to decide who it is that I want to work with. Build a team of other professionals so that we can add even more value, right? And not just have to approach it from a liability or insurance standpoint. Now we can cover some different areas and work, with individuals, whether they're employees or not, business owners, so from, regardless of what their entity is, even if they're just a sole proprietor or what have you, I think that we bring something to the table.
Yeah, I love that. I think, like you said, once you're in business, it allows you to basically choose who you hang out with. You get to choose your customers. You get to choose your team members, right? As opposed to when you apply for a job or you're working for the man, hopefully you have the right man that you're working for, because there's good coworkers that you enjoy working with, because you don't get to, a lot of the times don't have that option to choose, unless you're maybe in an upper management position and you're the one hiring. But usually that's not the case. And so once you're in entrepreneur, it gives you, I get to choose, like I said, who you hang out with, and that includes both customers and team members.
Absolutely. And then if a situation like, the other thing too is if a situation like COVID comes along, I mean, I don't think anybody could really foresee that coming. But when something like that comes, do you have the ability to adapt and adjust? And I think as entrepreneurs, especially with the space that you're in, the space that I'm in, we can go to video conferencing fairly easy, right? Contractors, law enforcement. I mean, if you're in a job out there that requires any sort of labor and physical activity, obviously you don't have that opportunity.
Right.
And being able to do business from anywhere, whether you're at home or on vacation, is a really nice element of that as well.
For sure. Yeah, I think for us, it was actually kind of I always say COVID helped me from making a bad decision because right before COVID, we had outgrown our office and I was basically looking for something bigger. But obviously with something bigger comes a bigger mortgage payment, more debt, more risk. And as an entrepreneur, I'm willing to accept that risk. But what COVID did, it's funny that you say that we get the ability to adjust and pivot because as soon as COVID hit, we started basically converting our tax and accounting practice into a virtual practice. And some of our team members, I gave them laptops and they actually enjoyed working from home. And as soon as kind of the pandemic kind of died off, you can see that our office is pretty empty. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're probably at the reception desk waiting for someone because all of our team members working from home and we've been able to pivot to work virtually. Now we have clients all across the state of California. We have some in Texas and Florida. We have in basically all 50 states. Mm. But what it did is it allowed me to reduce my overhead expense. And I was about to, assume a lot more debt and a lot more risk. And so because of COVID, it allowed us to adjust, to pivot, and it reduced me from making some, could have been a big mistake, but, I didn't know.
No, absolutely. When I was with the very well-known shop in Fresno, we were going up there once a month on Mondays and would have a breakfast and that sort of thing, get the team together. And there's probably 30 or so agents in that room. And the COVID hit, still gave us the ability to meet from home. Even if you're locally in town, to your point, Bakersfield has grown tremendously since just when I got here in 2005. And I hear people talking about it from 95. Mm-hmm. And to get across town now, it can take you 25 minutes. And so that the ability to simply just be able to jump either on a Zoom, on your phone, or on your laptop, what have you, it just makes it so much more efficient. They can still see content. You can still share things. And not only that, but from a training standpoint, you still have the ability to do that and not have to get everybody together in one room. Mm-hmm. You can still have that, training blasted out and still have people consume the content and be successful that way. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think with technology nowadays, it just makes more sense to do so. Just like you said, weighing the advantages and disadvantages to entrepreneurship versus W-2, there's also advantages and disadvantages versus when being virtual versus that in-person connection. Mm-hmm. And I found, at least in my experience, that the best model that at least that works for us is kind of a hybrid model where we're virtual. Like I have pretty much, not all my team members, but the majority of my team members have laptops, the ability to work from home, but yet we still meet up once a month. Mm-hmm. And we'll have like a social gathering just to build a culture in our organization and our firm. And because there's nothing like it, nothing's going to beat that, that touch, that connection of shaking hands and laughing together and
sure.
and that communication. You probably can't have that as that deep of a connection on a Zoom. But at the same time, like if we're not able to make it, life gets in the way, we still have that as an option. I think that the flexibility again of, kind of that entrepreneurship gives us, if we can have a hybrid model with the virtual versus in-person is also, I think, kind of the way to go in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you want to celebrate things, for sure, being together and hearing everybody and be able to look someone in the eyes. And then, on the flip side of that, people experiencing a tragedy, in life, trying to console or just, hear them out, over a Zoom is like, it doesn't compare to, being there physically.
Right.
And so, in the church that we attend, I host the 9:45 online service. And so we have that aspect of it. And then we attend the 11:30, and while a lot of churches weren't meeting, we were fortunate in the sense that our church, continued to gather. We went through a period, where they didn't have everybody in, but then I think ahead of most, our senior leadership decided, you know what, we're going to start getting back together. Take all the precautions you need. And if you don't want to, then, the online version's available. But, so in that sense, just like it talks about, not forsaking the community, meeting together, and getting together. So, but the hybrid, to your point, the hybrid models definitely probably I'd choose that over if I had to, rather than picking one or the other.
Yeah. And I think it gives people the freedom to choose what they believe is best for them. Like, in your church is like, hey, I'm willing to accept the risk that I could contract COVID, but I want to interact with people. I want to I get more spirituality if I'm there, at church versus at home.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives, but some people are like, hey, I'd rather have more precaution. I want to wait a little bit more until things kind of settle down. Well, then they have the freedom to choose that as well. And I think the hybrid model gives people that same, that flexibility, that freedom to choose, I think is what is important. So it goes back to like not taking that drive. I want the flexibility to stay at home when I want to. I want the flexibility to play golf when I want to. Right? I want the flexibility to do those things. And I think people appreciate that. And I think as long as everyone knows, like, I think for me, the reason, at first, to give you an example, I was very hesitant before COVID to have my team work from home. And then COVID kind of forces. And I think what was missing, at least in my opinion, like now looking back, is that I didn't have like a vision or a mission that we were working towards. Mm-hmm. And I think like as long as everybody knows the mission and the vision and has our core values, then it doesn't really matter where you're at, because you could be at the golf course, you could be at home, as long as you're pushing that vision forward, that's what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know to what extent in your practice, I imagine it's probably a pretty high percentage of it. I know for sure in mine, it's all about relationships. And the unique aspect of golf is that you get a full spectrum from kids who golf to employees who golf to business owners who golf. So, and you really don't know it until they're out there and you see them. But you can get joined up with a group. You can play in tournaments. You can play for, for charity type events and things like that. So, and it's a great way to get people together, and meet different people as well. And so, and try and establish some of those relationships, because you just never know. Before I got here, I was having lunch with a good friend of mine, and he was talking about his experience last weekend, and turns out he didn't really know who he was playing with at the time. But everybody kept referring to him as Big Time. Oh man, you played with Big Time? Yeah, this and that. And so he was thinking to himself, why are they calling this guy Big Time? It was good conversation. He was a good player and all that. Wasn't really flashy. So he didn't really get that sense. But come to find out, in looking him up afterward, he played for the 49ers.
Oh, wow.
And then kind of found out a little bit more about his background and that sort of thing, what he did for a living. So come to find out, he's huge in commercial real estate. So you just never really know about people, until, and I think over you'll know more about somebody, I think, over the course of a round of golf. Mm-hmm. than most situations. So
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used to be big in golf. I played varsity in high school. I've kind of dropped it since then because I feel like 18 holes is too long for me. That's probably why you get to know somebody so well, just because you're out there such a long time.
Right.
I think for me, if it was a 9-hole, they turn all the golf courses into 9 holes, I'd probably golf more.
Yeah.
But going back to your point about relationships, I think I always tell my managers, both my tax manager and my accounting manager, I was like, we're not in the tax and accounting business. We're in the relationship business.
Right. 100%.
Because at the end of the day, that's, we're serving our customers, we're serving our clients, and it's about, providing value to them. That's the reason that they're paying us. And so we want to continue to fulfill on our promises when they signed up as a client. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's what matters is the relationships. And now I've developed relationships with some of my clients where, they invite me to their family gatherings and, things outside of work that, are not relatable. And it goes back to just having those relationships.
Well, and, as you get exposed to more and more industries under the financial services umbrella, you begin to realize that as far as businesses are concerned, CPAs tend to be their most trusted advisors, And so, I mean, if you've built that relationship, I think it's mutual. Invites will go out kind of both ways. But it's a real interesting aspect because nobody was doing that when I was lieutenant. You know what I mean? Nobody was doing that when I was just a sergeant. And so, a company picnic just isn't the same. But, and so it does give you that opportunity for sure.
Awesome. That's awesome. So let's bring it to kind of what, the present, Deric, and the future. Like, what's in store for you? Like, you were in law enforcement, you went to school even before that for, physical background. Now are in insurance, entrepreneurship world, sales world. So what's in store for you? Like, where's your vision in the next, couple of years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I tend to consider myself, or at least the vision that I have is being a general practitioner, a Swiss Army knife, if you will, within the insurance industry. And so I'd mentioned before about building a team, and that's with professionals in different areas. And that could be everything from financial planning to CPA to health insurance. A lot of things that have come down the pike, especially here in California with respect to AB5 and that difference between independent contractors and employees, CalSavers, where they're mandating a retirement plan. And I kind of joke around with people. I ask them, you really want the state to oversee your retirement plan? I mean, and I think there's going to be a couple more elements coming down the road. So I want to be able to build an agency that services every line. So we're not handcuffed or restricted in any way. Mm-hmm. So we've got all the lines covered. Not only that, we've built relationships, a team of different professionals within different industries, so that from, again, individual to W-2 to business owner, we can cover the full spectrum. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but that allows everyone within the agency to achieve the same thing, because really what it is duplication, right? The agency owner now is trying to duplicate himself, and eventually he wants to relocate to Texas. And so who's going to be in that succession line, right? And that's going to be up to me to build other agents up so that they can have their own agency, if that's their dream, and pursue whatever it is that they want to pursue. And so that's kind of the big. I always start out big picture,
right?
And kind of reverse engineer the details.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because I think that reverse engineering, like you're saying, is important because it starts with the end in mind, right? Like where is it that we're trying to end up, and then just working backwards. And that big vision could seem overwhelming. It could seem like almost impossible to get there. But once you reverse engineer, okay, like what's step one, right? And step two, step three, and then eventually you get to your end goal, your end destination. Mm-hmm. But it goes back to just, creating that formula and then just working at it one day at a time. And then when you bake it up into small little pieces, it you know, it's not as overwhelming as it would be when you're just trying to get to that end goal right away.
Yeah, for sure. There's, you know, I tell people periodically, you know, there's two things, in my opinion, will be remembered for: your laugh and your legacy. And so with that in mind, you know, I try and keep that in the back of my mind, not only with prospective clients, but with people that I bring on board as well, because there has to be synergy there as well, you know, and having a way to provide the tools necessary, which is another huge element. And then as we move forward, new things will come out, I'm sure, and we'll adapt to those. But being able to provide the tools necessary for them to be as successful as they want to be. And at that point, sort of takes the responsibility off my shoulders, and now it's on them. Like, I don't have a problem. I've built it, whatever. Now I'm giving you the same opportunity, right? You're not going to start down here and have to work your way up. You're not going to have to worry about the politics of anything. This is you and your pen, so to speak. And so at that point, it's just really about, I mean, how much do you want? You know, how successful do you want to be? Because I'm going to do everything that I can within my power to provide the environment, the culture, the tools. At that point, it's on, because it was on me. It's on me right now. So I wouldn't have anything different for anybody else that I was going to bring on board.
Right. Yeah, I think it goes to that saying. It's like you could lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink.
So, right, to that point, teach them to fish, right? So, yeah, for sure. So that's kind of big picture vision. So
that's awesome, man. That's exciting. So for anybody that wants to join your team, looks like you got both a Facebook, LinkedIn profile under Deric J. Blanton. Also, you got your own podcast, Trial and Triumphs, which is on YouTube.
Yep.
So they can reach you there as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Any final words, Deric, before we end the show?
You know, just kind of one of the other things that I try and share with people, when the opportunity allows itself, is, you know, my faith first and foremost. And, you know, big believer in iron sharpening iron, and just doesn't have to be, you know, male to male. That can just be across the board, person to person, and learning from people's different experiences that they've had, backgrounds that they have, maybe other countries that they come from, and not judging a book by its cover, so to speak. And the other thing I try to share with people is that, you know, I believe there's the two most important days in a person's life: the day they were born, and then the day they find out why, or they realize why. And so, and just help people in any way I can, you know, and pay it forward. So that's me.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. So for anybody who wants to hit up Deric, and if you got some inspiration from insurance or from his story, make sure to hit him up. He's on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, as I mentioned. Deric, thanks for being on the show, man. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Joel, thanks for having me and for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.